Was that a flyby or a beach? Wow, my God, it's on fire. This is a sensation, the loudest emergency in Russia. In the sky over Moscow, air defense mistakenly attacked a passenger plane. The Minsk-Moscow flight. The flight is on fire. Even the trees are burning now. The pilot's last words. We're on fire. Our own people are shooting us down.
I repeat, it's a civilian route. Permission confirmed. Air defense is firing at us. I repeat, air defense is opening fire.
The Russian aircraft ended up in the sky over the Moscow region. A Panzer missile mistook it for an enemy drone. The explosion occurred during the approach to land at Sheremetyevo.
There are people here. I repeat, a civilian aircraft was mistaken for a UAV. Altitude was maintained.
There was new classified information. At the Ministry of Murder, there's panic, military communications are down. Was this Putin's order or a system failure? A Cobra regime has been introduced at Vnukovo and Selmetyevo. Takeoffs and landings are prohibited. There's panic and evacuation there. Breaking news. Russian air defense attacked a passenger plane on the Minsk-Moscow flight. This is the most high-profile incident of the night. New details have emerged. The Panzer system opened fire right in the sky over the Moscow region. The airliner was mistaken for a drone. The plane was damaged, but managed to make it to Sheremetyevo. The pilot's last words. We're being shot down by our own.
I repeat, civilian aircraft. Permission confirmed. I repeat, we are preparing to engage a civilian aircraft. This is not a network. There are people here. I repeat, the civilian aircraft was mistaken for a UAV.
This is not an isolated incident. Overnight, there was a wave of explosions and fires across Russia. Russian air defense is now firing on its own. Shells are falling on residential neighborhoods. An apartment building caught fire in the Moscow region. Apartments are burning in Pushkin as well. Drones and missiles are attacking Moscow, the city center, and the Moscow region. Yes, well, someone is suffering right now. Drones are crashing into apartment buildings. There's a fire there. We're filming. Here are the fragments, and over there, the apartment is on fire. It's terrifying. The explosion was so loud, I just managed to run away in time. Everything is burning. Apartments are on fire. People are screaming. There's a large-scale evacuation. Now a missile, a car. Something hit. All my windows are warped. They flew out with the glass. Muscovites are screaming. Something hit.
Look, they are flying high. They are flying high. Open fire. Open fire now. What are you talking about?
In the city of Penza, a fire broke out at the local CHP plant. The city is in blackout, and this is already the work of the good Ukrainian drones. A lot of them are flying toward the city. It hit hard there, a direct hit. For the second time, in Dubna, the Kronstadt enterprise, where drones are produced, was attacked again. In Tula, a series of strikes targeted the design bureau where air defense systems are developed. Strikes have been recorded in Kursk, Tula, Tver, Moscow, the Moscow region, and Dubna. Russia is in a panic. And most importantly, in Belgorod, a Russian air defense missile also hit a residential building. Today is one of the most shameful episodes in the history of Russian air defense. They shot down their own passenger plane. Who gave the order? Why is the air defense operating blindly? And who's next? While Moscow is putting out fires in apartment buildings, the Panzer systems are firing indiscriminately into the sky. Today, we have with us the well-known military analyst, Colonel Roman Tsvetan. He will explain how this is even possible and what it means for Putin's front. And what happens next? There, a department is already burning, orders being restored around.
Well, after a couple of planes go down because of these Panzers, believe me, the third one just won't take off. They'll ground them and just sit tight, not making a move. First of all, the Russians really do have a very good army air defense system. That's the Panzer. If they take out one Panzer, then a second, they've already packed 48 missiles into the second one, while the first had 12. So it's not a bad machine, it's an excellent machine, but it needs to operate in combat conditions. That is when there are enemies all around, as they say. That's the mode it operates in. Well, this is Army Air Defense, an Army surface-to-air missile system. It's used to cover troops on the move. Even during an offensive, it's specifically for providing cover. At those times, everything that moves gets shot down because everything is considered hostile. And these Pantsers, they're not bad machines, but I'll say it again, it's an army mechanism. They put it on civilian infrastructure, but only the Russians could come up with that. So using such a good machine in this way to destroy any flying object, no matter the level, including drones, it has cannons. Well, the first version of the Pantsir has cannons, and they work pretty well. And it's the same story with the missile. The missile has a range of up to 20 kilometers within an 18 to 20 kilometer radius. It can pretty much take out everything. And these Pantsers are deployed by the Russians at airfields. They've put this Panzer on rooftops, even on the Ministry of Defense building. Naturally, if it starts firing in all directions, let me repeat, it's supposed to operate in the field when advancing on the enemy, when it's covering its own troops. But here they're putting it on a high rise in the center of Moscow. So where is it going to shoot? Yeah, it'll end up firing at the high rises. Within a 20-kilometer radius of where the Panzer is stationed, people should have a mental breakdown for sure, a nervous breakdown 100%, because at any moment a Panzer missile could end up in your toilet. Just imagine, you sit down and suddenly, hello there, good evening, we're from Ukraine. That's pretty much how it happened this time, by the way. We had a widespread attack, which was problematic, I would say, in terms of efficiency. We've said it 100 times, there's no point in hitting the Russians in all directions. After all, they have those same Pantsers and they shoot down most of it. It's better to strike at a single area. But nevertheless, they struck Kronstadt. That's in Dubna. There's a really serious facility there. First of all, Dubna is one of Russia's technological centers north of Moscow. It's about 140 kilometers from Moscow, I think. But still, the Nuclear Research Center is located there, one of Russia's main ones. You'd still need to fly there. Take a look at what they're running in circles, those very same protons and neutrons, whether they're spinning them clockwise or counterclockwise. It's the same story here. In Dubna, they're assembling components and units for aviation and rocket technology, just like in Kronstadt. Russia should have been shut out of there a long time ago. It would be better if all our drones, for example, hit Dubna. Just take out one or the other, or really, both need to be taken out. But for now, we're talking about a barrage. Nevertheless, this barrage strike on a dozen targets, at the very least, is sure to give the Russians a nervous breakdown, 100%. Because they fired those same missiles in all directions and even tried to shoot down their own plane. They failed to do it. Can you imagine how incompetent they are? They couldn't even shoot down a civilian plane. Well, I mean, if you look at it from this perspective, obviously that's sarcasm on one hand. But on the other hand, it's also an indicator of the technical capabilities of these types of weapons. And the fact that the Pantsers will hit civilian targets is 100% certain. As long as they are stationed in residential neighborhoods, they will definitely hit high-rise buildings. So get ready to take hits from your own side. But they're used to it. Russians are already accustomed to this.
Friends, please like this video and write in the comments what you think about the Panzer firing at a civilian plane at civilian targets. Once again, this is very important. Russian air defense is firing at its own people. Everything is falling onto residential apartments. A high-rise caught fire in the Moscow suburbs. In Pushkin, it's burning too. There's a fire at the CHP plant in Penza. The city is in blackout. In Belgorod, an air defense missile hit a residential building. And in Dubna, the Kronstadt enterprise where drones are produced was attacked again. In Tula, there was a series of strikes on the design bureau where air defense systems are developed. The strike has been recorded. Kursk, Tver, Moscow region, Dubna. And Russia is in a panic. Roman Igorevich regarding Tula. There we struck the design bureau where Tuo is developed.
Smoke has appeared in Botka. Well, drones can also be used against the design bureau. It's still out in the open, meaning it's not underground. It's not a purely military fortified facility. You can only reach those with concrete piercing warheads, with ballistic missiles. But the Russians do have some pretty serious design bureaus. There are design bureaus, including some in Tula, but most of them are in the Moscow region and the Moscow area. Why do I always mention Moscow? Although there are some in Tula. There are also several others, at least up to the Urals in several cities. Design bureaus that are involved in the development of aviation technology, missile technology, and of course, ground-based strike systems. But the main thing now is the innovative aspects related to drones, control systems, and new warhead systems. In other words, it's an entire process that needs to be destroyed at its root. Basically regarding design bureaus as well. But it does make sense to use a drone. A drone, how much can it carry? Well, 50 kilograms like a backpack. Well, it won't do anything significant to a military facility that's buried 3 floors underground. Well, nothing will come of it. Sometimes a design bureau is located in a penthouse somewhere where the engineers like to get some fresh air. And then a fierce beaver comes flying in, fierce and a beaver, all at once, meaning from here and from there. But in reality, of course, it's better to use drones against oil refineries. When it comes to refineries, believe me, even a single drone, if it gets through and completes its mission, can inflict extremely serious damage. Why is that? Because the refinery is practically ready to burn on its own. All it needs is a spark. And here, 50 kilograms of explosives could just drop right on top of it.
Roman Ilyich regarding Dubna, where the Kronstadt enterprise was attacked, the one that also manufactures drones. We've talked more than once about Dubna, that there are nuclear facilities located there. Yes, nuclear research sites. Well, we keep attacking there constantly. How important is it to carry out these strikes? And you always say that the strikes need to be effective. So, in fact, we really need to almost completely destroy the facility. The floor is yours.
Well, you're right. You may be a woman, but you caught the main idea. Exactly. What's the point of wasting our drones for nothing if there's no efficiency? So let's say we produced 100 drones. First of all, people chipped in for these drones. They were produced, purchased, and delivered to the troops. After that, target designation takes place. They fly off in all directions, but there's point air defense over there. They have those same Panzer systems stationed there. So the Panzer, for example, is loaded with 12 missiles. So if you send the 13th drone in, it will get through and complete its mission. The Panzer will shoot down 12 or however many it can. And that's why it doesn't make sense to just send them off in all directions. Sending a swarm of drones, 5 per each Panzer system, that's how they'll shoot them down. What's the efficiency of that? So when there's no efficiency, then the question arises. Isn't that just the disposal of drones? Is that what it comes down to? I've already explained it in the simplest terms. That's how any air defense system works. There's what's called the saturation coefficient of the system. So in order to exceed this saturation coefficient at a single point, you need to send more drones. About twice that coefficient. If there's one Panzer system, just to put it simply, if there's one Panzer and it has 12 missiles loaded, then with one salvo, roughly speaking, it can shoot down 12 drones. That means you need to send 24 drones there. And then they'll accomplish the combat mission. But instead they sent 5 each. Only in the information flow can Dasha and I confirm, yes, there was some kind of drone flight somewhere. But as for the efficiency, like I said, even you are already clearly identifying it. Efficiency is important, and it's much more important than the informational message itself about someone flying somewhere and someone shooting at someone else somewhere. I mean, there's absolutely nothing military about this. There's a bit of showmanship here, but believe me, artists have never won wars. Wars are won by the military, who plan combat missions. For each combat mission, they allocate enough forces and resources to achieve a certain efficiency coefficient. But now, at least when it comes to target designation, some theatrical techniques are used and nothing more. They made some little announcements, collected money for tickets, and then everyone scattered, like gypsies, but only in the worst sense.
Roman Igorovich, here's another batch of information. Last night, the Lukovishi aircraft plant in the Moscow region of Russia was attacked. This was confirmed by the National Security and Defense Council. They specialize in the production and modernization of MiG-29 and MiG-31 fighter jets. Their modifications. They also participate in the development of new models of combat aviation, in particular projects for advanced frontline fighter jets. This is a quote based on the MiG platform. It is also involved in the modernization cycle of Geron drones. He wrote, Andriy Kovalenko leads the Center for Countering Disinformation of the NSDC. What do you say?
And this, in fact, confirms our point. Look at what the CPD people are saying. A plant producing MiGs was attacked. As a military man, I immediately asked these performers, did you destroy the plant? Will the MiGs be able to take to the air or not? What will they answer? No, we didn't destroy it, but it was attacked. What's the point of this attack? So that in the information flow, the CPD people could say that something like this happened? Now, if the CPD had clearly confirmed that after our drones attacked, the production cycle of the MiG-29 was halted for a month or 2 months or even 3, that would be some kind of measure of effectiveness. But what do they say? Such and such plant was attacked. There were attacks in Dubna. Some plant over there, something happened there. So what's the point of all this? That's what I'm talking about. So either keep quiet then. In other words, don't go around saying you're losers. Just stay silent in that case. They just burned through several dozen drones, basically sending them straight into the enemy's air defenses. They achieved nothing. That's what the CPD clearly confirmed. The report says a plant was attacked. And that's it. But in reality, the report should have said the plant was destroyed, the facility was destroyed. But I understand why they can't say that. Because you can't destroy a military plant with drones. Military plants get rebuilt. They're built to withstand a nuclear strike. So how are you going to destroy it with a 50-kilogram drone? Next question. So why are you sending these drones to military plants then? What's the point of these missions then? For what purpose? To achieve what? Just to dispose of the drones? Let me repeat, where can you actually send drones? Because that's where things explode and catch fire on their own. You can target above ground depots. Not underground, but above ground ones. There are depots for transshipment, for example, so-called transit depots located at certain distances, 500 and 700 kilometers away. So you can target those, you can hit airfields and oil refineries as well. And that's it. You can also operate in Crimea. Why is it possible to operate in Crimea? If you approach from the sea, it's inconvenient for them to shoot down drones because they're afraid that our Magura drones with anti-aircraft missile systems could take down their helicopters and planes. This has already happened more than once. And there are no more targets for drones. So for our CPD operators and our politically motivated target spotters, that's it. We need to drop this whole act of showmanship once and for all. Let the military handle target designation and allocate enough forces and resources to destroy the given target. And believe me, when the military does the calculations, there are certain coefficients involved. When they calculate how many drones need to be sent, for example, to destroy that same target in Dubna, then we won't hear anything more about it. We'll hear that 100, 150 drones entered Dubna, and believe me, nothing will be left there, at least for this particular task. But just sending them out to be destroyed for no reason. What can I say? No matter how much we talk about it, now everyone is starting to bring it up. Our political leadership is exposing itself far too obviously now. Such great target designators they are. Of course, it's not even about target designation. They've started an interesting topic. They're coordinating the target. Some targets get coordinated, others don't. That's all there is to it. Those who didn't pay for the coordinated targets, so to speak, they probably did pay for the coordinated ones. Remember that old joke when a traffic cop checks your documents and keeps saying, not allowed, not allowed, not allowed. Then he sees a 10 spot. Oh, now it's allowed. Go ahead. That's pretty much the same situation here. That's how it is. At least that's how it looks from an analytical point of view. But as for how it really is, well, that's for counterintelligence to deal with. About the disposal of our drones, wherever they end up.
Roman Grigorievich, considering the aviation collapses, can we assume that the time will really come when Russian Panzer systems will shoot down their own civilian planes taking off from Sheremetyevo or Pulkovo?
A couple of planes will crash after being hit by these Panzers, and believe me, the third one simply won't take off. They'll ground them and just sit quietly on their asses, not moving anywhere. They'll travel by train up to the Urals, and only after the Urals will they fly. Well, how far is it to the Urals? 2,000 kilometers. They'll rattle along, it's not a problem.
Successfully demobilized. Commander of the 155th Separate Marine Brigade, Colonel Ilyin Sergey. No details are being reported, but everyone is saying it's karma, ISU, GUR, SBU. They will find every war criminal no matter where they are. And the Chief of Staff of the 155th Separate Marine Brigade, Colonel Bashkardan Leonid. Roman Grigorievich, the floor is yours.
That was a strike on the 155th Brigade headquarters. In fact, there was one hit and then a repeat strike. And at that point, almost the entire command of the 155th Brigade was wiped out, along with the former brigade commander, who at that time was, you could say, already the former deputy commander of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. So they really took out a lot of people. About a dozen high-ranking officers were lost then. They were eliminated. For the Russians, actions like ours are actually quite beneficial since they have a deep bench of replacements. Everyone wants to get promoted to admiral, to general, and so on and so forth. So you could say we helped the enemy climb the career ladder, but in reality, the 155th Brigade and others like it have already been wiped out 649 times. They keep coming at us for nothing, for free. They didn't just lose 2 units. Take the brigade commander who was in Ugledar, he was eliminated. Plus the new brigade commander who replaced him was also eliminated, but this time near Kursk. This direction is very favorable for us because the Russians there don't have such a serious layered line of defense specifically along the Kursk direction. Why not? Extremely frightened idiots. They thought we wouldn't move toward Moscow. So in the Bryansk, Kursk, and Belgorod regions, there isn't a defensive line like, for example, the Surovikin line in Zaporizhzhia or Donbass, which was built up over 11 years. Those extremely frightened idiots don't have anything like that. They are covering this direction either with naval infantry or paratroopers. The naval infantry is mainly the 810th Naval Infantry Brigade from Crimea and the 155th Naval Infantry Brigade from Vladivostok. There was also the Caspian Naval Infantry Brigade from the Caspian region, several units from there, plus paratroopers from Ivanovo. It turns out there are paratroopers in Ivanovo, or rather, there were. Basically, they gathered up the last guys, sent them to Kursk, and now in Ivanovo, they'll have to start an LGBT community because there are no men left. But something has to be done because the women in Ivanovo are stunning, absolutely gorgeous. So that's the kind of attrition happening along the Kursk direction, right along the route where even the leadership of the 155th Brigade was taken out. That's Golushkovo, that's Lvovo, that's Rilsk, that's Korenevo, that's Chetkino. In other words, these are the rear areas of the Russian corps that's now still trying to shuffle around somewhere along the Suja direction.
In September, Russia lost 100,000 soldiers killed, not total losses, but killed. US Secretary of State Mark Rubio, after meeting with Lavrov, give your assessment of this political statement.
Well, if Lavrov confirmed such losses to him, then you can believe it. At the very least, Rubio wouldn't just say something like that for no reason. The question is, in what context is he saying all this? After all, they're still trying to stop the fighting by giving up our territory. In other words, it's a capitulation scenario. Stopping the fighting at this point, according to Rubio and his colleagues, means capitulation for Ukraine. That is, it implies Russian army control over the occupied part of Ukraine. That's more than a fifth. Over 20% is already under occupation. So within this specific and complex context, when all this hysteria is being intensively and deliberately stirred up, you can clearly see and understand that we are quite simply being pushed toward a specific direction, pushed toward capitulation, toward losing territory, sovereignty, territorial integrity, and so on and so forth. I don't think there's any point in paying attention to such statements. Why? Because Ukrainians won't stop. This concerns Ukrainians. Ukrainians, Cossacks, yes, they've never given up their land to anyone. Land and freedom, that's the main slogan of our people, of our grandfathers and great-grandfathers. So we will definitely continue to carry out our combat mission all the way to the state border. So after we reach the state border, we'll destroy them. Part of the Russian army, by that time, God willing, with the sanctions from Maliuk and Budanov, will destroy Russian oil refineries and the Russian economy will collapse. That's when we'll talk about the losses of the Russian army and we'll confirm them. And believe me, they won't be in the hundreds of thousands. They'll be in the millions of Russians.
God bless, dear audience. Once again, please like this video in the comments. Write your opinion, your analysis, and leave a few kind words for our duo with Roman Grigorievich. We work for you 3 times a week, and that's very important. Roman Grigorievich, regarding We Don't Stop. So we've come to an important topic, occupied Crimea. Now I will provide you with a series of information for analysis and discussion. 2 powerful explosions were heard in the Krasnoperkopsky district, according to subscribers of Crimean Wind. Next, a missile launch in the Jankoy district at 11:25. A loud explosion was heard in the Krasnoperkopsky district. Russian air defense was active in Jankoy. The attack by Ukrainian drones is extremely powerful, according to reports from occupied Crimea. There is a massive 26-kilometer traffic jam in front of the Tchenka Bridge at the exit from Crimea. Right now, artillery launch, Roman Grigorievich, our attack on Crimea continues.
At the very least, I think our drone specialists have teamed up with the shawarma vendors and the 26-kilometer traffic jam. Can you imagine how much money they're making right now at the exit from Crimea? And now the corn sellers have joined in too. So, this whole Crimean process, we understand it perfectly well. They're going to make a fortune, get rich. So after getting a certain cut from these shawarma vendors, you could easily churn out more drones, or at the very least buy more of them, send them where they're needed. But in reality, of course, there was an attack. Last night, drones and missiles were heading toward Crimea, heading in the right direction. Neptune. Well, the Russians weren't intercepting. On social media at night, they were freaking out, saying everything there would be wiped out. Not all of them. The main targets were the anti-aircraft missile systems. By the way, it was the air defense system that tried to intercept them, and specifically the air defense system located in Jankoi. Why is it always near Jankoi? We've talked several times about strikes near Jankoi. Why? Well, there's an airfield there. It's a tactical airfield, mainly for army aviation. Helicopters there are being rearmed, so that's where the air defense system from the SAM is located. There are S-300s and S-400s there. Once we've already taken it out, they've set it up there again, and that's why people hear it. There are constant approaches near Krasnoperekopsk and exits near that same Jankoi. This is exactly the work of the Russian air defense, which covers the Kerch direction from the northwest. And that's why it's very important for us not to slow down, to keep up the strikes. At least every other night or every 2 nights, we need to hit the enemy's air defense, including in Jankoi, and wipe it out completely. That attempt was made, and today drones went in. I think this won't be the last time. And so gradually and steadily, we are moving much closer to our goal. Toward our main objective, the Kerch Bridge. Well, and a 26-kilometer traffic jam, that's sacred. They've been robbed, warmed up, and so on. So at this point, these are the Russians' problems. They knew where they were going, so let them figure out how they'll get out.
Get out of Crimea, yeah, just breaststroke, freestyle, as you suggested, even doggy paddle, all the options. Roman Grigorievich has already articulated them very clearly in previous episodes. Watch the previous episodes. Roman Grigorievich, and as for Crimea, the cherry on top is that mobile service is down. Cell phones, everything is out. And of course, the racists from Redak are sending messages saying nothing is working for them. Isn't that just wonderful, right?
Well, the thing is, in this case, there are only a couple of options. Either write letters to your grandpa in the village or dig out your pagers. Remember, that's how it was in the last millennium. They need to set up pager communication in Crimea. But how else? Well, they're not going to call the rails anymore. In the end, although who knows, Russians, they're capable of doing just about anything.
I've prepared the following information for you as the cherry on top. Meanwhile, in Orsk, Orenburg region of Russia, a mechanical plant is on fire. According to local social media, the explosions look pretty serious. The plant's 8th workshop is on fire. Supposedly, the fire started with some materials catching fire. Orsk Mechanical Plant is a major Russian engineering enterprise that produces goods for the defense industry, including shell casings and components for MLRS. It also specializes in equipment for the oil and gas sector. Roman Lvovich, well, they sweetened the pill a bit for us with the oil and gas sector. The floor is yours.
Because these are our concerned citizens. They accomplish several tasks at once. First, it's truly a military facility. Second, it's an industry, including oil and gas. And third, most importantly, you noticed, right? Our concerned citizens have pointed out, it turns out, where the orcs' lair is. In Orsk. So, specifically there, that's where all the orcs are coming at us from, at least in terms of information. So, a big thank you to our concerned citizens. Thank you very much. Seriously, why? This is because we clearly see their daily actions and behaviors. They really are causing certain problems in the Russian economy. Oil transfer mechanisms of various kinds are burning. They're setting fire to pipelines and oil pumping stations. In Komsomolsk-on-Amur, they burned down an oil refinery. In other words, they're targeting the energy sector. And really, all it takes is a single match. Dry brush is set on fire where the pipeline runs, and that's it. You can write off the pipeline, especially if it's a gas pipeline. So they're taking action, and they're also directly targeting enterprises, which in principle can also be put out of commission if you know how. And I'll say it again, there are plenty of people who care because this war, the genocidal war of the Moscow Empire against Ukraine and Ukrainians, has worn everyone out, including Russians themselves. Especially when you remember that there are over 10 million Ukrainians, genetically speaking, living in Russia alone. Not to mention the dozens of state entities, dozens of republics and regional state formations that are now, practically all of them were conquered by this Moscow Empire, this Moscow Khaganate. And in the end, they too want freedom. In other words, this prison of nations must be destroyed. It can be destroyed from within as well.
Roman Nikolaevich, finally in Russia, they are expecting a drone attack, but not from outside the country, rather from within Russia itself. Sources from the VCHK OGPU channel report that heightened security measures have been introduced for law enforcement in Moscow due to possible attacks. All defense and shelter systems have been put on high alert. FSB officers have been deployed to duty almost in full force.
Well, it's right to be afraid. Why? Because how long have we been talking about this with you? It's already the second year. Well, you go to the market, buy an FPV drone, attach some kind of explosive to it, send it off, and complete a combat mission. When it comes to oil refineries, that's a whole different story. With a single grenade, you can burn down an entire plant if you know where to hit. With a single grenade, you can shut down a steel plant if you blow it up, say, with an FPV drone, or directly blow up the oxygen workshop. In other words, there are such critical points at every plant, at every enterprise, and those who care know them very well. And as for what mechanisms are used in these kinds of actions, well, each concerned person chooses for themselves just so as not to get caught by the Russian FSB, Russian police, gendarmerie, call them whatever you like. And these mechanisms are being used. Today, for example, we were discussing what happened in Orsk. A factory burned down in the center of the Russian movement in Orsk, or at least a workshop did. So that's right, not in terms of preparation, but indeed this process will intensify in the near future. It is already intensifying, but the concentration of certain means of destruction in one location is very important for us. It's just like in aviation with drones, all in one spot. And right now, the best option for everyone who cares is to gather in Moscow as well. Moscow needs to be burned too. That is, Moscow and Muscovites, those who make decisions and practically drain all of Russia, need to understand this. They suck out every last drop they can. They should feel this war, and not just the war against Ukraine. This is also a war against Moldova, the Pridnestrovian Republic. A war against Georgia, we saw that perfectly well. The war in Syria. It's the Russians, wherever a Russian sets foot, some kind of war is bound to start.
Burning Moscow, a perfect ending. Dear audience, we work with Roman Grigorievich 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. For audiences around the world, on my YouTube channel, Dar Shaslivaya, Roman Svetlan, a well-known analyst. Roman Grigorievich, thank you, and see you again on Monday.
Goodbye.